Jewish Grand High Priest seeks British ambassador's help to rescue a Freemasonry Jew. I would like to take this opportunity to mention a rather strange event. Not so long ago, the new Grand Hakam of the Jews in Turkey paid a visit to the British Embassy. He was a clever, enterprising, and well-informed man, and had previously studied with a large number of the leading members of the Society of Union and Progress. During the old order of Sultan Abdul Hamid, he had tried several times to be appointed director of the library at the Sultan Abdul Hamid Palace. This Hakam applied to the embassy for help, dealing with the matter of a Jewish Freemasonry named Ventura, who was an Italian national. A few years earlier, he claimed that he was a citizen of the Ottoman Empire. He was engaged in commerce in Sudan. He was later expelled by the Sardar on the grounds that this Ventura was involved in smuggling tobacco through two Jews in Suakin who worked for a man named Corporal White. This man having also been expelled and barred from returning, Ventura brought his case before the mixed court in Cairo and obtained a sentence in his favor in the face of the Ministry of War. But the Court of Appeal overturned the sentence. Then the Grand Hakam submitted a 200-page memorandum in which he detailed what he called the unjust actions Ventura had suffered. He asked me to give Ventura a letter of recommendation to Sir E. Gorst, in which I begged him to use all his influence to help Ventura's case, which was to be considered again before the Egyptian court. I explained to him that it was absolutely impossible for me to do such a thing, as it would affect the course of justice, especially as the person concerned was an Italian citizen. A short time later, a Jewish Freemasonry member here introduced himself as Dr. Ferry, who brought a letter of introduction from the British Freemasonry Council to one of my embassy staff. This person also demanded, in firm and command-like terms, that Ventura be given a letter of introduction to Sir Gorst. When it was explained to him that this could not be done, even if he were a British citizen, he raised his voice in defiance and said that the injustice involved in this case must be corrected. And for this purpose, the most powerful influences in the world, including those of the Jewish members of the House of Lords, would be used. He said also that if necessary, measures would be taken to overthrow the Egyptian government, and that the position of England in Egypt would be threatened. This man was not out of his mind, and he spoke in a very balanced style. Talat Bey, the Minister of the Interior, was of Gypsy descent, and came from Kurja, in Adrianople, while Javid Bey, the Minister of Finance, a Jew who pretended to convert to Islam, was the official proof of how much power the association wielded. These were the truly influential members of the cabinet, and they were also the top forces in Freemasonry in Turkey. Why they used agents consisting of people like Sakakini is highly suspicious. Since he became Minister of the Interior about a year ago, Talat Bey has spread the network of Freemasonry committees throughout the kingdom by appointing to provincial posts, such as governor, deputy governor, and so on, members of Freemasonry, or men trusted by the Society of Union and Progress, and in most cases, both at once. The aim is that should the majority of members in the present parliament, either due to an unplanned event or the fear generated by the state of emergency, mount an opposition in a form that could jeopardize the position of Talat and Javid, the latter would immediately respond by organizing an overthrow of power, dissolving the parliament and holding new elections, which would be manipulated by the clubs of the Society of Union and Progress and the assemblies of Freemasonry in the provinces, and could elect new members of parliament who would be more obedient to the will of Freemasonry. It is clear that what really ruled Turkey as a secret government was the General Assembly of Freemasonry with Talat Bey as its supreme chairman. Eugene Tavamir, in his paper in the 19th Century magazine, April, has declared the French Republic to be the offspring of the Grand Council of Freemasonry. Such a title was perhaps aptly given to the Ottoman Society of Union and Progress, since it was the Freemasons who were the supporters of the society, whereas the vast majority of the non-Freemasons, meaning the overwhelming majority of the population, were secretly opposed to the government. As with the Republicans in France and the Freemasons, their most frequent words were reactionary and religious. Their main aim was not to change the country. Their main aim is not to change and modernize natural law, but to undermine and destroy it. Most of its leaders, while frankly professing to be rationalists, have in a diametrically opposed form sought to use the Islamic fervor of the people as a political weapon, and channeled it into chauvinistic goals along the lines of rationalism, namely Asian pan-Islamism. He is extremely unreceptive to the position that one of his main ways of destroying his enemies is to push their position in such a way that they have to openly declare their opposition, and then destroy them as reactionaries. Some of the clergy have been encouraged to join Freemasonry, and these clerics are being made examples of, with the view to dispelling the displeasure and prejudices that exist among the people. One Turk remarked that this was a process of intoxicating the clergy with Jewish marijuana. From our previous research, as well as from any careful study of the Young Turk movement in its present stage, it will be clear that it is essentially Jewish and Turkish in nature, as opposed to the other elements of the Ottoman Empire, such as the Arabs, Greeks, Bulgarians, Armenians, and so on. The Turk is generally a soldier, and under constitutional forms, he strives to keep his kind of nation dominant, something he can only do through the army. He therefore spends 1/12 of his income on the army, and uses the army to keep the other elements in a constant state of fear and silent submission. A constitution, from one point of view, implies economic progress, but the Turkish economic organism is of a very fragile type, and if it is not adequately supported, it will not last even a week. At first, it was hoped that the Armenians, Bulgarians, Greeks and Jews would serve as the motor of the economy, but it appears that the Young Turks were only in cahoots with the Jews, both within the Ottoman Empire and outside of it, while the other nationalities were left aside. The same situation can also be observed in Hungary, where the Hungarians, who are of the same origin as the Turks and are equally untalented in business and economics, have fallen under the total domination of the Jews in the field of economics and finance. The Jews appear to have engaged the pre-economic mentality of the Turks in their endeavors. Since the Turkish state includes the holy places, in Israel's view, it is only natural that the Jew should strive to maintain a monopolizing position of influence and power, and use these to achieve his goal of an independent, self-governing Jewish state in Palestine or Babylonia, as Israel Zangwill has explained in his paper in the April Fortnightly Review. By a single act, he could achieve two goals at once. If he could secure from the Turks the right for an unlimited number of Jews to move to Turkey. This goal has in fact been pursued by him for many years. They had already succeeded in moving to Mesopotamia several million of their religious brethren, who had been living under oppression in Romania and in Russia. In return for the unrestricted immigration rights granted to Jewish aliens, the Jews were willing to sacrifice their own mother tongue and replace it with Turkish. In fact, they were also willing to take over the entire debt of the Turkish state. Dr. Nazim, one of the most influential members of the Salonika Committee, and allegedly of Jewish descent, in the company of Fake Bey Todu, a Jewish pretender to Islam in Salonika, and a very intimate friend, had visited the Paris branch of the ICA Jewish Colonization Society, from which time he had openly advocated the deportation of 200,000 Romanian Jews to Macedonia, and several million Russian Jews to Mesopotamia. Israel Zangwill, in his paper in the Fortnightly Review of April, has referred to the above-mentioned problem, and expressed the hope that Haki Pasha, the present Prime Minister, should be trusted to give his advice to the Sultan in good form on the matter, that is that the Turkish government would agree to establish an independent state for the Jews in Mesopotamia. This Haki Pasha had been given a private secretary, Jew. He also visited the Jewish home very often, but the Jewish plan has yet to be realized. There can be no doubt that when the Young Turks, with their heavy military expenditures, were in dire need of debt, further pressure could have been exerted by the Jews who lent the money. When Sultan Abdul Hamid was in a desperate financial situation, He had rejected similar offers made by Hertel, the Zionist leader. Ideas such as these suggested that, for unless the members of the Young Turks have a little more sense than money, it must be reminded to them that it would be a great advantage to the country if the industrious and militant white population were allowed to come in peacefully. Zangwill says that there are 4 Jewish members of the Turkish parliament who are very anti-Zionist. They may pretend to be so on the Palestinian question, but on the Mesopotamian question, they are not. The political character of the Young Turks cannot be ignored by people who will have anything to do with projects in Mesopotamia, Syria, and even Egypt. For the Aurora Shefik, a Zionist organization that began its operations in Constantinople a year ago, will not tire of reminding its readers that dominating Egypt, the land of Pharaoh, which forced the Jews to build the pyramids, is part of Israel's future heritage. This theory may sound far-fetched, but it was clearly believed and propagated by idealists. But it was only Mesopotamian Palestine that was the final destination of the Jews. The immediate goal of what they were doing was the practically destroyed economy of Turkey, as well as new ventures in that country. It has been stated above that they had succeeded in gaining control of important places in the Young Turk government, although the Ministry of Public Works, which might influence the granting of concessions, was still held by an Armenian, Halagian Effendi, when his successor, also an Armenian, was dismissed from office. Efforts were made to replace him with a Jew, or someone proposed by a Jew, but especially after the massacre of Armenians in Adana, it was felt that it would be better if the post continued to be held by an Armenian. 2 months ago, it seemed that Halagian would fall from his position, but he managed to extend his term by becoming a member of Freemasonry in the same assembly as Talat Bey and Javid Bey. His position is not yet firmly established. The most severe and persistent attacks on him came from the daily La June Turk Young Turkey, a newspaper financed by the Jews. There are rumors that he will be replaced by a Jew, or replaced by a Turk with the Jew as his main companion. It is clear that the Jews, who are of course very interested in maintaining their exclusive power in the councils of the Young Turks, are also very interested in keeping the flame of hostility that exists between the Turks and the enemies of the Jews, or who may become enemies in the future, such as the Armenians and the Greeks and others, always burning. At the same time, it was understood that the Jews should not feel bad about the new government's ever-increasing debts to the Jewish financial circles. This aspect of the Turkish Revolution has been dealt with above in a lengthy form, and besides its historical importance, it has a direct or indirect influence on the problems of the Near East. The Jews hate Russia and its government. The fact that England now has friendly relations with Russia certainly has its influence in making the Jews to some extent anti-British in Turkey. And in Persia, a consideration I think the Germans are very eager to take into account. The Jew can help the Young Turk with ideas by trade, and by his enormous influence in the European press. He can also give money in return for economic advantages. And in the end, he will be able to realize his goal of establishing the State of Israel. Young Turkey, meanwhile, wanted to regain and reassert its national independence.